Hey everybody, welcome to Gigs. This month we have an art panel. As I like to tell people, I can passively do just about anything in the industry except for art. I can't draw, I can't model, I can't animate, I can't do any of the arts. So this month I have three amazing artists who are going to talk to us about being an artist in the game industry. As always, ask questions in the chat if you have any, and let us know what your thoughts are about what's going on. So that's enough for me. I'm mostly going to be moderating. These guys are going to be talking, and I'm going to have them each do an intro as normal, and we're going to start with Brian.
Cool.
Hey guys.
Yeah.
Oh, wrong Brian.
Other Brian. See,
the magic of two Brians.
Okay. I got it wrong.
Yeah, I'm Brian Cummings. I'm a technical artist at Unknown Worlds Entertainment. I've been there for about 7 years. I actually started as a production intern and then transitioned into tech art as I was there. Was working on Natural Selection 2 when that started, and now I'm working on some Nautica. We're in early access, coming out probably next year. Before that, I was at the Art Institute of California, San Francisco, and I was doing game art and design. I was started interested in 3D modeling and actually transitioned into production, which is why I was a production intern at Unknown Worlds. And before that, I lived in Alabama, and I got an associate's degree in 3D modeling and animation, and then got my first industry job as a freelance 3D artist at a studio there in Alabama. But it's a small studio. But anyway, yeah, that's me.
All right, Donald.
Nice. My name is Don Ott. I am currently a contract freelance artist, working with Irrational out of Boston on their next super secret title coming out someday. Working on that right now. My history, my background, I graduated from Art Institute San Diego probably about 10 years ago or so, and then right out of college I was at High Moon Studios in Southern California, where I worked on probably about 10 different games, everything from Transformers to Deadpool to canceled Darkwatch 2 to I did some work on Call of Duty Advanced Warfare, and then also an upcoming portion of Destiny where High Moon is currently working. Actually, it's not a secret anymore that they're working with Bungie on Destiny. So I did some work with them, and then I left High Moon to take up the position where I'm at right now with Irrational about a year and a half ago, and I moved out and worked in a freelance life out here in Houston, Texas. So I do that. I'm co-owner of 3dmotive.com with my partner Mike Snight, who is also the lead environment artist at Irrational. And I also teach a game art course out of Laguna College, where I've been teaching for about 5 years now. And I used to teach on site. Now I'm also teaching online. That's about it. That's pretty much what keeps me busy right nowadays.
Wow, just make me feel like an underachiever. Thank you. All right, other Brian.
Hey guys, my name is Brian Choi. Most people call me Panda unless they figure out another nickname. There's a couple. I'm a character artist at InXile Entertainment at the moment, and I did my undergrad at the University of Southern California doing what is now known as the Interactive Media Division, I think, or the name keeps changing, but I came out with a BA in Interactive Media, which just translates that as game design. And then since then, I would say like my first internship was with Blizzard doing QA on Diablo 3 for items, animations, and UI. And then my first job out of the industry was a contract was at the time Tapstone, but now is Cabana LA, working on some undisclosed mobile games. And then 2 years of contracts there, working on like Disney stuff and Republic Remaster, doing a couple costumes for them. And then now I'm here with InXile. It's been like 8 months since January since I started with them, and we're all the way in Newport Beach. And there's another studio in New Orleans that we just began recently. And we're working on Bard's Tale 4 and Torment Tales of Numenera. Though more specifically, I'm on Bard's Tale 4 at the moment.
Awesome, awesome. So I want to ask you guys specifically about how you got your first job. So this ranges from portfolio to networking. How did you get your first gig as an artist? Don, why don't you start?
When I graduated college and the Xbox 360 had like just come out at the time, so it was definitely different. Now from the standards of what I push like for my students and for I see a lot of young artists on like Polycount and some of these places nowadays. So to put that into perspective, back then it was still just as much of a importance as it was to be able to create, art that could realistically go into the game, like, from day one. I had actually worked at a virtual reality company just for a brief, about a year or so while I was in college, which kind of thankfully put me a little bit ahead as far as the knowledge and understanding. It gave me a lot of insight. And I was basically, I got an interview, like, request like the day of my portfolio show out of Art Institute. Some of the lead artists in them came and saw my stuff and asked if I was looking for work. And I had already talked to a couple other studios, briefly about getting ready to graduate. And Hymo Studios, they saw my work, and literally by the end of the day, I got back home and it was like, holy shit, I had an invite for an interview like 2 weeks later. And so I, sat on my ass for a couple of weeks after graduating college, and then I showed up to the interview, and they brought me on the team. At the time, I was working on the tail end of Born Conspiracy for the Xbox, for the Xbox 360, which was one of the early 360 games back then. So, and of course when I graduated, I had no idea. The only thing that I knew much about Hymo Studios was they worked on Dark Watch, and I was like, oh cool, I get to go make a vampire first-person shooter, and then I show up in studio and they're working on Born, and it's like, okay, well that's a cool game too, but it was definitely not quite what I was expecting. But it kind of explains, like, okay, well that was the art that I had in my portfolio, kind of more, sort of the stuff that maybe appealed to what they were doing. So that was pretty much it. I was there for, like I said, almost 8 years. So I started out just fresh out of college, and I hit the jackpot with the team, and they liked my stuff, and they hired me up. So
that's awesome. Panda, how about you?
So with the internship or the actual like post-uni job?
Both. Let's hear about both.
So the Blizzard internship with the QA, that happened originally just the regular application they send out for the college students. So you send one in. I think for the QA position specifically, they asked people to analyze a specific game. I chose Red Dead Redemption just because that was such a recent, intense memory for me about like how I felt about the game after certain events happened while playing it. And so did an analysis of that, sent that in, application happened. Interview process happens, so they do a phone interview first with me, and then later on they do on-site interview. I happen to live, my family lives in Southern California, so it wasn't that much of a deal for me to kind of, drive down to Irvine. And I remember the whole process was very intense, because just growing up, Blizzard's been at least one of the kind of like childhood dreams, and this is essentially kind of like stepping foot onto hallowed ground, essentially. And so if you can imagine my surprise when I'm in my two-person dorm room and I get the phone call back from Kat over at with H, the headhunters, who's saying, "Yeah, you got the internship," and I'm like screaming, I'm like, "Yes!" and like,
wow.
and like everyone else on the floor doesn't know what's going on, because like not everyone's a game developer, surprisingly. So that whole summer was just this awesome, like, first relatively gentle intro into like this is the reality of game dev, at least from the QA end, and especially with Blizzard, like they have a really awesome QA team. They treat their QA people well. They're an integral part of the process. I mean, I've heard stories, both good and bad, from across the spectrum. But with Blizzard, they are part of the dev team and part of the campus, as far as I can tell. Admittedly, though, during the process, like I knew I wanted to make game art, so QA was a good intro course to everything professionally. But it definitely cemented in me, like, I want to focus on doing game art as my particular discipline in game development. And so fast forward through the 4 years of university, and we get to this weird point where I graduated a semester early, so I'm sending out jobs. No, sorry, a little bit before that. Internship. So senior internship, surprisingly. Sent a job out to a place called Tapsen in Culver City. And they call me back, and short on-site interview, and then they bring me on to work on their mobile games that they're working on at the time. And that experience was my first time professionally doing character art. So working with Wee Din, who's a mentor of mine now, on like both some concept stuff and mostly doing like highly efficient, low poly models for mobile game characters, weapons, and a lot of conversations with Wee about like what do I want to do for the immediate future, the long-term future, and like him kind of giving me a lot of a wisdom that I honestly didn't receive from a lot of the previous internships I've been at. It was a very focused, like, him, me kind of situation that was happening. That only lasted for, the internship lasted for a couple months, and then couple months pass, I finish up school, and then he calls me back like, hey, you're available for a contract, or like full-time contract. I'm like, oh yeah, absolutely. So a couple more months with him, I think till July 2014, I believe. And that was my first official position coming out of USC, at least. And my first kind of mobile game that I worked on at the time.
Cool. That's awesome. How about you, Brian?
Yeah, actually, I have two, because I have my first one that I got in Alabama, and then when I rebooted back in San Francisco. But when I was in Alabama, I was at school, and my teacher recommended, hey, you should go to these meetups, which they were hosting. It's for 3D users in the Huntsville area, so doing all kinds of things. And I was like, I definitely want to meet new people in the industry, or just any industry, just 3D modelers, people who are doing what I want to do. And eventually they had a speaker come who was from the game industry. There weren't very many game developers in Alabama, as you might imagine. And so I was just like blown away, like this is an actual job that I could do. And I ended up stalking the in a way, I guess to put it, he said he was teaching a class in Birmingham, so I'm like, okay, I enrolled at the class in University of Alabama, Birmingham, and then I would wait after the class and talk with him, walk to his car in the garage, and try and get like art, like an art test from him or something. And eventually he did give me an art test, and then after the class was over, I didn't hear much from him for a couple of weeks, and then eventually he gave me an email, and he's like, hey, we're going down to New Orleans. We're going to be modeling the city for a trucking game that we're making, and we need another guy. You want to go? And I'm like, hell yeah. And it was just really one of those like awesome moments, like, okay, I'm doing it. And it was it was like a week where like had a house in New Orleans, so we would like spend the day taking reference photos and then modeling, and then go in the nightlife we would have some fun, which was definitely unlike anything I was expecting. But I was working with them as a freelance artist for a couple of years, and then that kind of like dried out, and I moved to San Francisco. I needed a better education, I thought, and so at the Art Institute, I knew networking at that point was going to be a really big key to getting a job in the industry because of my experience before. It worked out so well. And so I was going, and San Francisco has tons of meetups, and even like I've only been in school for a little bit, and I would just go and I would go to these meetups and just talk to regular people like they're regular people, and because that's how they want to be talked to. It's just like, sorry, it's just one of those things like you go to meet up and you see these students that come up and they'll be like, here's my portfolio, here's my business card, this is all I want to talk about, just here's me and bye. And I go up and I would talk to them about whatever they want to talk about, talk about games and in general, and just like make friends, and then maybe one day they'll remember you when they're looking for a person to hire, and they'll give you a shot before they go to the stack of people. And that's kind of how it worked out for me with Unknown Worlds. I graduated the Art Institute, and I had been unemployed for a little bit, been going to the meetups, and I talked to my now boss, Charlie, who was hosting the event, and I'd known him for a couple of years at this point, so it was kind of a formality when we had an interview, and he's just like, I need someone to help me out with this, and thought of you, so why don't you help me out? And that's how I got my production internship, and eventually ended up working on transitioning into tech art because I had the art background, and I was just kind of like, they wanted me to keep working with them, and I realized there was a lot of holes in the development that needed to be filled, that, they were a very new company, so they didn't really realize that there was so much other things that you can do as an artist without, that it's not just creating content. So that's sort of like where I am now. I don't actually create any content, and I don't even program. I'm just kind of like in the middle doing everything, pretty much filling in the gaps.
But that's why we love you. You're like
no, I love it too.
Best friend.
Yeah.
Tech artists filling in the gaps.
I mean, there are a lot of different definitions of tech artists, but
yeah,
that's sort of what I like to do.
So that kind of Maurice asked a question. He asked, what kind of technical proficiency in regards to coding do you think artists need to have in their everyday tasks? You know, that's kind of interesting because I kind of have different experience with artists that do programming as part of their job. But what about you guys? What do you feel like as far as like someone new getting into the industry? What should their familiarity be? Brian, why don't you start?
Which one?
Chops.
Okay. I'm just going to assume Grant calls me Panda, so it's like
okay.
I'm going to call another Brian Panda.
Okay. Well, I actually, I mean, I have a good fundamental understanding of programming. I can interface well with programmers, but I don't do any programming myself if I can help it. But there are definitely lots of technical artists that I mean, all they do is write scripts and work on tools and make shaders. It's one of those fields that has like a variety of different possible responsibilities. So yeah, you kind of don't need to have a whole lot of technical proficiency, but maybe you guys have something else to say about that.
I had none. I couldn't program Hello World if you asked me to. So I just, that's pretty much it. The last time I did any of that stuff was in college, and I've been lucky enough to have like really smart people next to me or near me. The closest I've probably ever gotten to like really having a strong relationship with someone on the technical side is when I've done like weapons and animated stuff that needed to get rigged and things like that. But having a technical artist there to go in between, setting up the rig and stuff has always been good. Being able to talk with them and discuss like ways the objects need to get animated and things like that. But I couldn't rig a box to animate a bounce cycle if you ask me. I've made it this far. I'm not saying you don't need it. Especially for smaller studios. It's like the smaller the studio gets, the more you need to know. I've been lucky enough to work at a fairly large studio, fairly specialized. So I've not had to learn it. It's not always the case, but for me, I'm the worst person to ask about any technical questions. As people smarter than me and make more than I do, they can figure it out. So that's the way I look at it.
What about you, Panda? Have you run into any need for programming?
Oh yeah. I'll speak to USC first. That's my experience there. That you have to imagine, as big as a school as it is, the game program, it's for game design. So I end up being like one of maybe like 3 people who know how to make game art, like officially. Like some people can draw, but that's not game art, useful game art per se. So I ended up art directing for Core Overload my junior year and a game called The Maestros on my senior year. And that involved, on top of everything else, learning technical stuff like, how do you rig stuff? Like and talking with the more, like our primary technical artists, but like how many phones can we use? What's the complexity of the VFX that we can do? Like, why are we running it like 10 frames a second? Like, why won't you let me have this this awesome like blood spatter like arguments with our engineers and whatnot? So just in lieu of the fact that being in such a position, and as Brian has mentioned before, that and Don as well, that small situations require artists to not specialize but to generalize and know more things. I found myself having to learn how to like understand how engines quote unquote crunch things, or why draw calls are more expensive for this thing as opposed to that. I was really lucky though, because a lot of the teams I was on, they had very awesome engineers. We're talking like ex-JPL, people who were working at Riot during the day, grad students, undergrad people. And so I was coming from a very technical perspective, and a lot of the like purely artistic things I had to do on my own. And so as far as like the usefulness of it ends up being like, and it's hard to say, because I know, like knowing how to basically rig, knowing how things should, like how certain materials can be jimmied to like save memory but have a lot more impact. I feel like makes me a better game developer. Like creatively, obviously, it was like if I was learning that, I'm not putting in as much time in becoming like strictly a better visual artist per se. But I think in discussions with, in certain interviews and like different bosses of mine or people I've worked with, it's ended up being useful. So like now I'll describe for InXile that while I was brought into the character art, there's been a lot of instances where like there's a level sequence that I did where it involved blueprint scripting, which doesn't require math for what I need to do, just it required like logic and animating in blueprints, so like moving bones over a specific time frame, rigging up environment assets, and then getting those implemented in the blueprint scripted up. And so as far as I can tell, like I am someone who, and I enjoy doing this, that like it's not just making the asset, it's like getting it into game, getting it implemented, working, talking with design about how it's supposed to work. And so it becomes this weird confluence of tech art. As I don't want to call myself tech artist so much as like a generalist. But that's, we're unique because we're not a small studio, but like there's not a lot of artists that can specialize at InXile, I think. So someone like me who knows a little bit more than just how to look pretty things ends up being useful for us on the projects that we're working on.
Yeah, what's interesting is that at Epic on our team, right? So we have a bunch of artists that, you know, they know the basics of the engine. They can put things in the engine, but that's the extent of their technical need. We have our VFX artists tend to also be our tech artists and tend to be pretty technical. But like for example, one of our UI artists is like, he's basically a programmer at this point. When he got to the studio, we introduced UMG, which is like you can move widgets around using blueprints and stuff like that. And he's like, I'm gonna run with this. I'm gonna get really good at it. And now he basically like is a fourth programmer on that team. He can do kind of whatever. But most of the artists on our teams, they don't need to have that coding experience. I think it's probably more similar to Irrational in that, you know, when you're or High Moon, when you're kind of a medium to large size team, you're probably going to really hyper focus on what your job is. So yeah, those are great answers. All right, so the next question we had, what tools do digital artists love? What do they want that may be missing? This is from Roman Sailor, who is a tools programmer. Anybody, take it.
So outside of existing software, like Marvelous Designer, which comes for a pretty penny, like scripts and stuff, or we're speaking to tools, I really like, I'm still waiting for like a good hair solution, like stuff that will let me groom things properly, like an actual hairdresser does. Like I like how Marvelous Designer treats clothing creation as like actual seamstressing. Like, you have to have actual patterns that you need to know how those patterns exist in real life and how they're stitched together. And there's been constant discussion about like, or hope about like, hey, we're waiting for the hair solution that will allow us to groom hair instead of like what it is now is like meticulously placing alpha cards in specific patterns, and it's not impossible, but it takes a while. So if someone figures that out, all the money to you every day, all day. I mean, I love Boolean tools. Boolean tools are great for high quality modeling. The better Boolean tools you make that sit on top of Maya or Modo. I use Modo in this case. I'll love you forever, and I'll pay for it. I don't know. It's like something out of the box. I can't really think of.
What else do you? What about you guys, Brian, Don, and then Panic and think if you can come up with anything more.
We're always looking for good LED tools and like collision creation tools, stuff like that.
I think I kind of agree with what Brian was saying about Boolean tools. You know, I'm seeing stuff from like Modo and some of those guys that are just creating some just crazy awesome solutions to kind of help with it. And anything that can constantly and efficiently speed up the high-quality modeling process, I think, is always going to be a big win. You know, one thing I see a lot of tool programmers, if I was going to like suggest something for someone who wanted to make tools for artists, is the ease of the UI and like the clarity of like how the tools are installed and how the tools are used. I mean, I think that, like, for example, the newer version of Unreal, not to like, you know, I'm not going to blow you over here, but to basically like the new UI and how smooth and how fluid and how clear and easy it is. It's like, imagine I'm a fucking moron who's like 6-year-old, because most of the time that's how I feel, and I want to be shown exactly what your tool does, how to do it, make it very simple, make it elegant. And I think that's what some of these other tools and some of the UI and stuff is starting to really, make successful and improve on is really dumbing it down. Don't make it so complicated with a kludge of menus and things that make it confusing. So I think smart UI and intelligent UI design is key, as well as UI install. You don't want little Billy over here blasting you on the internet talking about how shitty your tools are because you can't get it installed. And you have to play like HR online trying to fix your problems here. I think as artists we tend to sort of do the same thing over and over, and we don't really know that there's a better alternative sometimes until someone hits us in the face with it, and then we really have to get convinced. I'm terrible at ZBrush, but I know just exactly what I need to do in Mudbox, for example. And everybody's showing me all this badass stuff in ZBrush, and I'm like, well, I can kind of do that over here in Mudbox. I mean, what's the point? I get scared, and I'm like, oh, I don't know if I want to go learn Substance. Like, I can do a lot of that over here in Quixel Suite. Like, why would I want to use Substance? Like, I got to get really convinced because we get set in our ways, and we don't really know that that's a much better and smoother and easier and faster alternative. I see another big scary software, and I'm like, fuck it, I'll just do it all in Max, or I'll just do it all in these other softwares that I know. And so, like, the stuff that, like, those guys are doing now with, Quixel's doing it, and yeah, I'll give credit to all the other ones, but I think a lot of what they're doing is they're putting these videos out. They're giving people instructional videos rather than just throwing it up on ScriptSpot and saying, figure it out, you morons. I think kind of explaining it to your users, making simplistic UIs, create tools, have a bunch of people throw it up for free, give it away, and let's see what you've got, what you've created. That's really helping people. That's really speeding up their day-to-day workflow. I got this new script, iPack That, which just kind of hit mainstream recently. I mean, iPack like blew my fucking mind, right? I'm like, oh my god, this is like the most awesome thing ever. And it's a real simple UI. It's stupid simple. It's like Brian was saying, here's my money, take it. Here you go. Real simple, real clear piece of software. And I think that's what it all comes down to. It's the shit I do every single day is with UV unwrapping, and this software just knocks it out of the park, for stuff like that. So I think that's what it's all about. I need to be treated like an 8-year-old, who doesn't have time for bullshit, who wants the real simple version. So sorry about my rant, but I
echo that, like, legitimately. So my interaction with these scripts are mostly like download it off a Creative Crash. Like, see the video, just do the thing I needed to do, great, download it or pay for it. And if your README sucks, like my anger meter jumps to like not the nth degree, but it's like I don't have the wherewithal to sit down. Yeah.
Exactly.
So like, if you're lazy, just like make sure the tutorial, the README is like clear, be available for emails. I'm assuming most of those developers are available for emails, because like at some point I will give up and like not search for solutions anymore because I'm not that technically minded as much as my left brain exists.
Yeah, it's so as much as I would like to take all the credit for Unreal Engine, which I don't work on at all. I do thank you. But what's really interesting there, just for any people who are aspiring tools makers, there's two really key things that came out of that, and one is to test the product with actual people that are using it, right? So if those people took 5 minutes to email some artist that they knew and were like, here, I'm not going to tell you anything about this tool other than what's in the README, go figure it out. And you're instantly going to know it's not working, right? So, even this past week, one of my friends sent me a tool that he's working on, and he's like, hey, can you open this up and see if it crashes? And it crashed. And I'm like, here's why it crashed, because, I have Visual Studio. And he took 2 minutes to figure that out instead of taking, just putting it out there. And the other thing is, if you can get someone to help with your UI, like an actual UX person, that's why, Unreal's stuff has been improving, is we have a whole UX lab where we not only test our games, but we also test our engine. And now I don't expect any, random person making tools on their own to have a UX lab, but there are people you can contract to help, work on your UI. So we got really into that topic, and I got really into it, and I was loving what you guys were talking about. I was like, I don't know, this is really out of left field, but this is very enjoyable. I
feel like the big topic is just like UX for game dev or game engines, because that's just such a.
I will have a UX panel at some point. I work with enough of them, and they keep asking me if they could be on, and I really want them. So, anyways, next question. Jimmy asked, why would an artist, digital and traditional 2D, digital 3D, any of those, ever go to college or university to attain a degree, especially when they aim to produce content for the entertainment industry? I'm guessing what Jimmy is saying is, why did you go to university instead of just training yourself to be, just fucking great?
I have a few opinions on that. I mean, as someone who's kind of gone from both sides of the field as far as going to what I felt was a pretty poor college at the time, and then now trying to, okay, what was wrong about that college and trying to improve on it. I don't want to be one of those horrible, awful teachers that everyone talks shit about, when they get out in there and they go. But I think that here's kind of the catch about this question, because it's, should I go to college? Should I not go to college? You're always going to get people from different opinions. Mm-hmm. The truth of the matter is most of us went to college, and most of us talk shit about our college. Who was like a badass at 3D or a badass game artist went to an art college, but we all want to talk a bunch of shit about how awful of the time we had, how horrible it was, how we wasted our money. A lot of us. Okay, I'm not gonna say all of us, but a lot of us do, especially from certain colleges and certain schools. The thing is that what happened with me is I got out of the Marines and I went to college. I didn't know my head from my ass. I didn't know the first thing about anything about what to do. I thought people just drew pictures and boom, there's video games, right? That was literally all I knew about how game development worked. I didn't know what I needed to know, and I think that's what I got out of college. I made friends with some people. I got buddies that I'm still friends with to this day. I learned where the forums are. I learned where the places are, and all this crap that a lot of people who kind of are dabbling in the water are finding out on their own. They're learning about polycount. They're learning about tutorials and videos and stuff that's way more available now than it was 10 years ago. And so in my perspective, a lot of people get into college and they start their college degree having absolutely no clue what they even need to know. And that's where school can really help kick them in the ass. If you're like in that middle of the road where you already know some good 3D and you kind of got your head above, especially sometimes when you're a little bit older and you've been around the internet a few hundred times and you start realizing, wow, I can look up Google reviews and I can do all this kind of stuff. I think that you might be able to achieve some of the same level of quality of 3D artists. I'm not saying you have to, but I'm also saying that for some people, that was the exact same kick in the ass that I needed to get to know what I needed to know and make friends with the people I needed to make friends with. I wouldn't be here where I am today if not for college. And a lot of people are the same way. They may hate it and they don't want to admit it, but they may not have met that person or got kicked in that direction. So I would say, like, for the hobbyist who's already kind of a member of the community and stuff, it may not be as necessary. But I can guarantee you, I kick the shit out of my students, and maybe 25, 30+% don't even pass my class, and that's because I'm not messing around with them. And little Billy's sitting in grandma's basement, making one 3D model a year. He may not be getting that kind of push or that like drive to like kick his ass to be able to really make some stuff that's good enough to get him a job. So that's kind of how I look at it. I really push my students because I don't want to be that sort of let's just churn out game art students. And for some people, that's what they need, and it does good for them, and they get jobs, and Merry Christmas. But beyond that, I don't know that I would ever say you have to, but for some, I'd say it's pretty good. That's my opinion.
So for me, I grew up like from a culture of I'm a second generation Korean American, so growing up was always like, you are going to go to college or university. I was able to somewhat dodge the stereotype expectation of lawyer, doctor, or something else. And like my parents knew I wanted to make games. I think I was super lucky that I was about to graduate in the moment where I'll call them like, say, a well-known universities like USC or UCI, and I'll include like LCAD and places like DigiPen and AI had programs for game development in some way, shape, or form. And while trying to destroy my SATs, destroy my grades in a good way, not a bad way, because I didn't know what college I was going to go to, I ended up looking at USC and like, okay, so here's a place where I'm going to get there's a 4-year university at what seems to be a good university. It also has a program that's about game development. They actually make games. And actually what happened was Chapman University versus USC. Chapman basically said, we're going to give you so much money, you only need to pay $4K a year to us. And like, that's a pretty good chunk of change. USC, not so much. But the student advisor got me into contact with Drew Moxon, who was at Microsoft at the time, who was an alumni. And he basically said something to the effect of, the talk of this Trojan family, this is specific to USC, but the talk of the Trojan family that comes up is a very seriously real thing. And honestly, like that's probably one of the most important things that coming out of USC that you're going to still keep, and it has massive effects. It was that, and just seeing what USC was able to do already, because I can't really name anything Chapman's done, and USC had like buzzwords like EA attached to it, where like Microsoft was helping him out with something that made me choose that even despite the price tag. And if I can succinctly put what my experience is looking back, and that was like 2.5 years ago, what I paid for, as far as I can tell, was the college experience, the people that I met there, and the resources that they had. Because USC never, ever forced me to drink the water. It just kind of simply said, hey, here's the river. Do what you will with it, because we're not going to force it up your throat. And that means stuff like, hey, you don't have to make a game freshman year, which is odd to me, because the first year, for a lot of the students, it's like, get your GEs done, get all these other classes that aren't about game dev, which to me was like ludicrous. So all my free time, my freshman year, while other people in my class weren't making a game, like I immediately jumped onto a senior year project, being like, hey, I can make pretty things. Let me make pretty things for you. And at the same time, they said like, oh, you're an artist? Come. Because mind you, school of mostly designers and engineers.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's, personally for me, that's what I focus. Like if my classes aren't letting me make games or do game dev stuff, I'm going to make games on my free time. And that was a particular sacrifice I made. And that meant like I didn't join a cappella groups or did a lot of other things that you might, attach to the typical university experience in the US.
Getting drunk all the time.
Yeah, and Don, you bring up a good point. Like I am hearing those conversations too, like whether you should go to school or not. I would encourage people who are on the fence, like be brave for us. And honestly, like if you feel like you need to do the college thing, do a community college, get your GE crap out of the way, because just in case you might want to go to university later. But like do that first to see if that's something you want to do. But it does mean like game art, learning on your own is a somewhat quiet experience, because it's just going to be you looking at videos most of the time, and you having to talk to people like actual developers, actual artists will be like a manual step out for you, as opposed to like, hey, professor I'm learning from also happens to work at such and such studio or has, and that's a very easy kind of social introduction. It's not like a cold open at a bar, or but like that's be brave for us if that's something that you feel like is a possible option, because we would love to know for certain that that's a thing that you can do. And I think collectively people agree that it is possible, because the stories exist. It just, by volume, it's mostly university or college trained people versus solo people. But it's possible. But be brave for us and just do that.
Brian, what do you think?
Oh, I'm sorry. Just on his note with that, I would definitely recommend too, just avoiding the pitfalls of learning about the colleges, because he mentioned a bunch of really good ones and really high rated ones, but it's always avoiding the pitfalls that people who feel like they got suckered at their college or whatever really need to avoid. And that's looking up the reviews, spending those times. Don't get suckered in by the recruiter, because the recruiter's got one job. That's to keep your dumbass in their school. And so you really need to look at like actual reviews, look at portfolios and things like that. And that's kind of the thing. But being on the fence is one thing. Being on the fence and falling for a sucker school, which we all know they're out there, that's even worse, because you're going to graduate 3 or 4 years later and you're going to have a shit portfolio, and you're not going to be ready for the industry, and you're just going to be 80,000 plus out of debt, and you could have avoided that with go on Facebook and go online. I mean, this is a huge commitment you're making to go to this college. So anyway, I would just definitely reiterate about making that choice and the steps you really need to do. We could do a whole class on colleges.
Yeah,
right.
I would like to shoot
a whole lecture. Whole lecture.
Be proactive as high school students. Just please be proactive if this is something that you're going to do. Like, because I know it seems early because you're in high school and you have other crap to deal with at that time. But like, I think just be proactive. Like, really research the schools if that's a thing that you think you might do.
Yeah. For-profit art schools are everywhere, and just getting more and more out there. I definitely enjoyed my time at the Art Institute. I got a lot out of it. I think that it was the best environment for me, and I guess it really depends on the person. But being able to work with other students and making relationships with other people and teachers as well. Someone that takes networking, I think of that very important, as a very important thing for getting in the industry and just finding a way to learn about games. And yeah, I definitely think that school is a good environment for that. But it is, of course, a very expensive proposition, and you also have. I definitely think what Brian said about getting your general education stuff first, and then going for the art classes after that. That's a good way to cut some of the costs down. But yeah, I guess it's one of those things. Yeah, a lot of people do, of course, complain about their schools. I definitely think it was the only way I would be where I am right now. I realized going through school that I didn't want to be a 3D modeler, and it was something that I didn't know going into it. But seeing all of the other students that were waking up every day and they just want to make art, and that's really the kind of thing that I look for in someone who wants to be an artist, is just someone who's definitely motivated to constantly be working on new art, whether they're doing it for homework or they're doing it on their own. That kind of thing really makes good results in the end of school. Like, those people are always like way better, and I knew I couldn't compete with that, which is why I decided to transition to production. Plus, I was having more fun with that anyway.
Those who can't do produce. Wait, shit. So I think what's interesting, and what all of you have said, is like, you learn at school, but some of the most valuable things, and I'll echo this as well. And since Panda didn't mention Full Sail, I have to say it, because you mentioned all the other schools, but the one I went to
when I was undergrad or before.
All the ones except for the one I went to. Thank you. But it's really a couple things, right? It's make sure you're making games wherever you go. And what I found is at every school, if you're an artist or a tech artist, either one, and you're willing to work on people's games, they're going to take you even if they're like Panda said, a senior project already. Like, that's how we were. I was like begging any artist to work on our senior project with us. So you want to make games. It's a great opportunity to network. I have hired, I graduated with 25 people. I've hired 3 or 4 of them at some point. I've worked with more than that. And I've probably 10 or 15 of those I've passed job opportunities to. We're just a very tight-knit group of people. So it's the people you meet making games, and then obviously what you're learning. So there's a lot of different things happening at school outside of just the basics of I'm learning. And also, when you have professors and teachers like Don who have industry experience, then they can help get your foot in the door. I was lucky to have teachers who were like, oh, hey, this guy, we like this guy. I'm going to introduce him to people I worked with at an industry position, to try and help get his foot in the door. And also, if the school that you pick, I always tell people, make sure you're looking at, like their job placement ratings, and call and like email alumni and be like, hey, how did the recruitment team work with you? How did the placement team work with you? Because that really can help. A lot of people get a lot of jobs through placement or through job fairs and stuff like that. So that was my attempt to summarize everything you guys just said. So let's move on to the topic that I really want to talk about, probably the most with you guys, which is portfolios, right? So you knew this was coming. We're not going to review anybody's portfolio, but we're gonna talk a bit about portfolios. So the first question is from Lila Baker. Is it better to have a very focused portfolio, i.e. only 3D, only concept, or is it better to show that you know how to do a bit of everything?
I could maybe speak to this, since I'm closest to this probably. I want to err on the side of focus it down, because this is mostly because of my recent Polycount posts that I've seen, that the people who try to diversify, either topic-wise or technical-wise, end up with things that they have a lot of, but are not very good-looking. And so it's like distributing a column of water between several cups instead of just having like one yard-long beer from Yard House. And like you'd rather have that Yard House long one instead of a bunch of tiny cups. And I think for people who, like students especially, like you have a limited set of time to get super awesome. Shine bright. Don't give me a bunch of dull LEDs, because I care more about the bright LED as opposed to a bunch of dull ones. I know we've discussed about the reality of like, people, even for me, like I had to learn a blueprint script. I had to learn how to rig, or I wanted to. But that first impression, like focus on something very specific if you can, and make that look as badass as possible. This is kind of hypocritical to me though, because it's like I always felt my portfolio always like was stretching between characters and like, oh, I can do props, and oh, like here's me doing art direction stuff, or oh, here's like some light technical work I did. But as I look back at the time, like it was still mostly characters and like small amount of stuff. Keep it as awesome as possible. Try not to diversify early on. As far as I can tell, that works most of the time.
I'd say it's kind of hit and miss too. It kind of goes back to what I was talking about earlier, as far as whether you kind of get lucky and are in an area, or you have vision and acceptability to working in bigger AAA studios, and your portfolio is solid enough. Well, if you want to be an asset artist, make assets, make badass assets, and focus on those things. You want to be the weapon guy, you better make 3 or 4 or 5 or however many really, really badass guns. But bearing in mind, well, that's going to eliminate, like, okay, well, maybe I can't. Maybe this studio over here doesn't make guns, or maybe they're a fantasy game company. So you're kind of eliminating out that area of your probability. I always talk about kind of like a casting a giant net. Like what's the most common sort of job that you're looking for? What's the most common sort of environment where they're hiring the most? It kind of just depends on what you're getting into. If you want to be a character artist, which is a tough damn job to get in for your very first job. Yeah. Brian can probably attest to that. But like making small assets, making props, being a prop artist is probably something that's got some of the most jobs out there. And then like, okay, what are most studios making art for? Maybe tailoring your portfolio towards those aspects or those assets. And then, kind of just taking some of that stuff into consideration with what you want to do. Maybe dabble in some of those other areas, but I totally agree. You can get a job with 3 or 4 really good, high-quality assets, or 2 or 3 really good, high-quality characters. If you've got 10 shitty ones, all you have is a bunch of shit, right? That's all it is. And when we're trying to hire people, we know it's just a bunch of shit. You're not going to impress us with your volume of shit. You're not going to impress us with the polish and the lens flare and the skylight render of shit. It's still shit at the end of the day. Yeah. So focus on those 2 things that really indicate what you want to do. And like I said, I've hired guys when we were working at Highland Studios with 3 or 4 things on their portfolio, and they just were really badass. They looked just like what our art test was. Everything was good. It looks like they could work for us today. Let's hire them. We've interviewed guys, same thing, characters, 1 or 2 really awesome characters. Let's hire this guy. Let's do it. And I think that's really all you need. I don't believe in diversified unless you're more of like that, I'm indie and I want to do indie development or mobile development or small team development and stuff like that, which is totally cool. But you are going to have to really, wear multiple hats in order to do that. You want to work in AAA, you want to laser focus, a little bit more focused on it, in my opinion.
Yeah, I totally agree that I would only want to see good stuff. I don't like seeing any like shit, basically. I guess something more along the lines of like if you're going to do something similar to what I do, get something in engine, show some renders of things in engines, like even a mod, put it in a Skyrim, put it in CS:GO, something like that, Dota 2. If you can see your art in a game, like then game developers can also see your art in a game, and it may help you learn some things about how about the details of what you need to do to get art that actually looks good in a game, just from that experience. And yeah, I guess that would be my advice.
I have a feeling generalization, and correct me if I'm wrong, that it just comes with time. Like, Like all this stuff I know now just came out of necessity of situations. It was like I remember that same advice like even years ago, like specialize, don't diversify. It's like, okay, I'll do characters, but then like it was just because of the needs of certain game projects I was on that was like, oh, okay, now I guess I know rigging now because I had to rig.
You're that guy. You're that guy who can do that thing really well. Now you're the fucking tree guy or the rock guy or the character guy or whatever. Yeah, really depending. And that happens too. It happens to us all the time. Some poor bastard who lets everybody know that he's good at making trees. Well, guess what? You're the tree guy. Yeah. That's how it is, you know. So but yeah, definitely, especially for those smaller teams where you're letting everybody kind of you're learning new things and showing off those new skills.
I think maybe as like a way, if someone's listening to this, they wants to commit to like a focus on generalization. On the note of like making it as sexy as possible, there's probably a way to do it if like you make a game, either a game or game-like project where you are like just it's one thing, but like imagine like an Unreal level where it's like you have characters that you made, but you also animate and rig those characters. You made the level art, you've scripted up certain like things like doors or something, but like when I say level, I'm talking like a small diorama. And yeah, it might just be like one page on a portfolio, but I have to imagine, and I haven't seen this yet, like in regards to both like a fresh student and one portfolio piece, where if, like a diorama, like, oh, you've done everything here, level art, rigging, animation, VFX, that might be able to crack through as like, oh, this is like a good generalist, but like at the same time, you might screw yourself because it's like, well, you've only pigeoned yourself into this one possibility, which like it happened the same for me coming out of school. Was like, I'm a character artist. That means I can't as strongly apply for prop artist positions that a person who introduced themselves, I'm an environment artist, would be able to do, and that's a very frustrating feeling, understandably.
So let's this stays in the portfolio, but Maurice kind of asked more of a like kind of push down question, which is about like demo reels. So demo reels, do artists tend to prefer wireframes, poly count? Like, should you show all that stuff? He says, I've seen some reels where it's just the final product and not particulars. Also, do you prefer it like in an actual reel format or a website? I know artists who get hired via one or both, particularly the ones without a reel, but they had breakdowns on their websites. Well, I'm just gonna say always have a website and have your reel on the website. But let's talk specifically about the reel. Like what type of content should be in those? Brian, why don't we start with you, because you were talking about stuff in engine. So does the in-engine stuff tend to be in a reel?
In Unreal, you said?
No, like in a demo reel, like in a video. I mean, it should be in a reel. Let's be honest.
I guess what I was suggesting was really only for. I mean, you don't want to spend too much time doing that, I would think, because you need to focus on creating the content that you're trying to sell. So, yeah, I guess the main thing about a good demo reel is, yeah, if it's on a website, make sure that it actually works, and it just having to go through a lot of different steps to watch someone's video is always frustrating. But yeah, I guess I don't really have very good advice for what should be on a demo reel. Sorry.
That's like Don. What about you?
I hate them, honestly. I can't stand going to somebody's website and, half the time their shitty video doesn't play, or it's blasting some lame music they don't have copyright for, and it's 15 minutes of intro about their dog and who they are and how they feel today. And so, I mean, frankly, and again, like High Moon is nothing compared to some of the big AAA studios I've worked at in the past when I was actually actively seeking employees to work with me. The truth of the matter is I got a stack of 20 or 30 above you, and I got 10 seconds to determine whether I love you or hate you, and I'm not going to waste 15 seconds of that for your little intro of your video. But that's specific to my field. Now, somebody who's an animator, well, obviously, you need to have an animation demo reel. Character artists, things like full turnarounds and stuff like that. But if you want to be a prop artist or an environment artist, show me some pictures and some screenshots of your environments and your props, and I can usually, smell some bullshit if I feel like you're faking the funk Like, I know whether it's good stuff. You know, it's like, okay, this guy's good. And I'll know within 10 seconds. And if I don't, I delete it. I move on to the next one. I don't have time to watch a 2-minute video. I got 20, 30 other guys to go through. Think about the hiring manager over at Blizzard, those poor bastards, or over at some of these other studios where they have, you know, hundreds and hundreds of people applying for jobs a day. You want to catch their attention like that. And when it comes to environment prop art, like, boom, first page, there's your art, looks good, your best piece right in front of you. I can't stand videos, to be honest with you. And if you do a video, it's got to be something from Vimeo or whatever, or YouTube, not your own custom Flash bullshit on your webpage.
Yeah.
It needs to be something that just loads. I mean, those days are gone. You know, doing demo reels from before, you used to have to deal with that kind of crap. You know, forget the music or do something real simple. People always blast them. Ooh, check out me. I'm edgy and emo, and I got some badass rock music or whatever. And just all you're just pissing people off. Animation, like I said, animation, yeah, we want to see animations. We want to see, you know, stuff moving and all that kind of stuff. That's a whole different ballgame. But, you know, on the realm of art, you know, go look at anything on ArtStation from popular 3D artists. You know those guys are badasses, and that's good work. That's the kind of stuff you should be trying to imitate. Nowadays, too, like Marmoset's got the full-on renders you can do, and I can't think of the name of it off the top of my head, but the viewport, you know, you can literally open it up and boom, you can see your model in full view. You know, there's no excuse for not having something like that. But you go to our college is going to tell you to make a demo reel, and you know, I would just bury it at the bottom of your portfolio and put the still images as far as props, environment art. That would be my suggestion.
Yeah, I get the same. Like, the only times I think a video is necessary is if you're animating. If you're an animator, you need your animations. You're a tech artist that have stuff that's like, it doesn't look good unless you see it moving. Like say weather effects or like a skybox you made. Otherwise, character art, prop, environments, still images first. The breakdowns, what I remember doing student art directing, like, I was really only looking at those to, like, I could spot bad topology quickly. I mean, not everyone's topology is perfect, but you know someone who's like, doesn't understand that even quads is a good thing and a necessary thing most times, versus someone who does do that at a glance, relatively. So it doesn't have to be like super crazy. Like, you just break it down. Like, here are the texture maps. Here's the wireframe of the thing. I'm trying to think of, like, really bad, like Wix. I almost used to say like Wix sucks as a website thing. But if you are willing to go out of your way to jimmy it to remove a lot of the unnecessaries, do that. I personally use Blogger, and I've had to CSS HTML my way to remove almost everything besides the bare necessities. If you can make your own website, do that. Yeah, just the general stuff still applies. If you find another polycount wiki, keep it simple. We're here for your art. As much as I think you might be an awesome, cool person, your bio should not be the first thing I see. I will find that. I will stalk you on Facebook otherwise on my free time. Art first. Keep it, like, it should be no more than 2 clicks to get to, like, images. I think that's like a good rule. Or you do 1 click.
2 clicks is too many.
Yeah.
I got time for 2 clicks. You got 1 click. Your URL is enter, and that's it.
Scroll. Just scroll.
Move on to the next one.
No Flash. Don't even think about adding Flash.
My website starts with my bio.
Oh yeah.
Never going to be an artist.
Never going to make that. Well, and it's one thing to have a portfolio, and it's one thing to have a portfolio for, hey, I want a job. You know, I mean, if you're an artiste and you got a job, you can do whatever the hell you want. But if you're looking for work, you don't want to start off pissing people off, because all you are is a name that nobody knows and a pile of a bunch of other names, and nobody cares about you. You know, let me break it down for you. But that's the reality of it. And you got about 2 seconds to tell me whether your art's good enough to come here and work for us. No.
I like this, guys.
It's
so true.
I'm an asshole. You don't want to work with me.
That's why you're on the panel. We always need an asshole. All right. So I have a couple more questions. One more from Maurice, and then I'm going to ask a question to have us close it out. So his question is, like, at your studio, does your company, you know, because you guys are all kind of at different size studios or have worked at different size studios, do you guys have separate modelers, texture artists? Do you expect the artists to have the whole gamut of skills, texturing, UV, unwrapping, modeling? Also, how much other art skills such as shader creation are you guys involved in? So I guess kind of at the studios you worked at, have there been people who have kind of done different parts of the pipeline, or is it important that you know all parts of the pipeline regardless?
When I was at High Moon, it was pretty much we made the whole thing. We didn't have special shader artists, texture artists. We all the way from block out to final shader material setup inside the game engine. We did have people that were more specialized shader artists that handled like the fancy stuff or like anything that was a little bit outside the scope of the normal everyday shaders. But beyond that, 100%, all the maps, all the textures, the model, and everything we did. So. Yeah, that's how it was at High Moon. At Irrational, it's a little bit of a hybrid, but I'm not going to go into that right now because it's super secret. But at High Moon, the whole time it was pretty much always, you always made everything, for the most part. I believe on Destiny they had like some Atlas textures here and there, and sometimes you would map to Atlas textures. But pretty much, yeah, every other game I've ever worked on is always that way. The standard.
I would hope Irrational's process is at least rational to some degree.
Disconnected from call.
They call me Thunder sometimes.
Yeah. We have a lot of artists that are just dedicated to making cool art, and then animators that are separate, and we have a shader guy, and we have me. And so we kind of do have our own specialized groups for sure in my studio.
What about you, Panda?
InXile at the moment, as I can recall accurately, everyone is doing some chunk of the huge pie that is game art. So for me, it's like people know that I can audio mix and audio implementation, rig lightly, do environment assets, do character assets, do light blueprint scripting. But there's some stuff that I won't know that someone else does. So like for example, our lead environment artist is more attuned with like the actual world building and level building in Unreal for us. So she's more attuned to like, hey, this is how we have to break off the maps. This is where we have to do level streaming and stuff like that. And so everyone does share some, like if you can imagine the big pie, there are things that people overlap, but for individuals, there's always something they can't do that someone else knows how to do. Given the scale of our studio, we don't have dedicated people doing shader stuff, even though heaping praise onto Unreal, the out-of-the-box tech is really good still. So there's no need for a shader artist yet, I think. But that's up to the brass. There's no like really crazy specialists that I've heard before. I know, like somewhere in Activision, they have just R&D developers dedicated to just making weird kooky stuff for mainline dev in the future. Like more esoteric positions, like a guy who's just dedicated to substance materials. That's like not going to happen unless I think if you're at a AAA studio. So, or like a AAA studio that has that volume of people to deal with.
Yeah, and I mean, I would say I've worked at AAA studios that are that big. I mean, we had 200 people work on Rage, and like that's the only time I've seen that we had like texture artists, and that was also because we were using mega texture technology. So we had people we called them stampers. So it was basically we would have this giant texture, right? And their job was to go and make each kind of section of the level sing in its own way, and they would apply stamps. And if you see the difference between non-stamped and stamped, or non-textured and textured, or base textured and pretty textured, mega textured, you're like, but that's the only time I've ever seen like an individual whose responsibility was something that small that was texturing, and the team was 200 plus people. At Epic, people do it all. It goes through the pipeline. They do the modeling, they do the texturing, and then the animators do the animating. So, and we have a rigger, but sometimes the animators even do their own rigging. So yeah. All right. So I want to ask one last question, and you guys, let's go in the order that you introduced yourselves. What is the last thing that you want to say to someone who's trying to get into the game industry as an artist? Or what would you say, another way to say it is, what would you tell yourself before you got into the industry, or when you were getting ready to break into the industry? All right. Brian, are you ready?
I guess so, yeah. I mean, I would say, networking was the biggest thing for me. Yeah. I get out there, do game jams. Game jams are great. That's me. Are you frozen for Grant? Or are you? Oh, you
No.
just.
I'm reading it.
Frozen. You're sitting real still. Go ahead.
Huh.
Go ahead.
Are you good, Brian? Okay, Don.
Yeah.
Okay. That is a tough one because so much has evolved. You know, I'm an old bastard now, and there's been so much change. You know, I would say that probably, you know, networking was such a big deal when I first started, was, you know, going to meetups and stuff which are out there now, you know, getting familiar with other people in the industry and just kind of making friends with other people. You know, there used to be this Beer Tuesday or Beer Thursday or something there in SoCal. Never went to one. I was out there for years, never went to it because why do I want to drive an hour to go drink beer and have to drive back, right? So, but I kind of wish I did, you know, just to make more friends and get to know more people. I was kind of a hermit in college a little bit. I kind of kept my head down. I kind of wish I would have, you know, kind of at least gotten a little bit more familiar with some of the people because it is so important. You know, here we are 10 years later. That guy worked with that guy who worked with that guy. We all know each other in some way, shape, or form. And you mentioned it earlier. My God, every job out there, you know, we know about it before you do or other people do, and we share amongst ourselves, and you know, people get hired, and it's a huge thing. Very, very important for networking. And then also, you know, nowadays too, with you know, not to like pimp my own website here, but man, there's a tutorial for every question you have on God's green earth now. And so finding like and learning more software would have been way smarter back then because I had to save myself so much headaches. You know, oh shit, this software can do this for me or do that for me, and it's made such a, you know, huge difference nowadays. Where when I was younger, if I had learned more software and really focused on some of those other online tutorials and learning resources, I could have, wow, I could go pick up this or this and this. It would make my art even better. You know, there's like literally no question you can't type into Google without getting the answer for, without finding a fucking tutorial for, or whatever. And so, you know, being okay with learning more software and stuff would have been something I wish I would have spent more time doing. I was like, you know, like, don't wear blinders where you're only learning one or two things. I don't know. That's, you know, beyond that, I mean, you've got to make friends. You can't just sit in your basement. You know, a lot of the people who are most successful were more social, more outgoing. You know, everybody wants to sit in that grandma's basement and make 3D art and wait for the bucks to come in, right? You're going to be part of a team. You're going to try to hopefully work with people, and so it's important to be sociable and take a shower every now and then and stuff like that. And so, you know, going to these things and getting out of your shell is going to be an important part, an important aspect of getting and keeping those first jobs that you want to get inside the game industry. So those are some things I would have slapped myself with and said back in the day, I guess.
Don, I want to plug that your 3D motive has probably been one of the most critical things that I was able to take advantage of during my time at university. So I want to actually like really thank you for being better than digital tutors, to be honest, because 3D
that was our goal.
it was less intimidating, better price, better tutorials, I think.
Wow, I appreciate that. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I linked in the chat too.
Yeah, guys, 3D motive, it's awesome. It's just getting more awesome over the years. I mean, it helped me. It's going to help anyone who's commits to learning those stuff. I mean, the rigging tutorial saved my arse, essentially.
Yeah. The one Justin made is like the Bible of character rigging, and we've got some new ones on there. But and you know, when we first started, that was the goal, was because I knew when I was learning, these tutorial websites, a lot of them sucked, you know, and I'm like, wow, we want to get some good ones. So I appreciate your feedback on that.
Mm-hmm. So,
Hannah, what about you?
I could talk about my business all night, but
that's a great, interesting question to ask. But I'm trying to think of something that isn't talked about that often, because I feel like a lot of this stuff you can't find on Polygon. Like, you go to general discussion and you type in like how to get game art, and like those things will come up, and like things about discipline. So I'll get a little bit uncomfortable and open about me about like about my process, like until I got into InXile, that there was a good 2 years after uni where I thought, whether it was ego or it was the reality, that like, I thought I worked so hard to get my first game job, and I was surrounded by a lot of good friends and awesome people that I worked with who were getting positions right out of the gate, whether it was like with Riot or Microsoft, and I was kind of left alone. I felt I was left alone, being like, why haven't I been able to get like a full-time position somewhere? Like, I had contracts, but they weren't going to pan out for like, I didn't feel like I had my foot through the door, or my body through the door as opposed to my foot. My foot was already there, but that didn't feel like, I didn't feel whole at the time. So if you can imagine like the next 2 years, well, intermittently working on game stuff and other things that I had this like this deep like I want to say like rage and disappointment and anger about like why am I not where I want to be or I think I should be. And for those people who like aren't even that close or like are in the same position right now, who like they just come out of uni or they just got out of like a huge learning situation and like life is now changed, like if they're not in that context anymore of being next to people in a student setting or like in that safety bubble, that try not to hurt yourself too much and like realize that you know you are more than just a game artist. Like you are like you exist for more than just like making awesome game art stuff. And that's something for me, it's hard because like so much of my life, both in terms of the hours I spend on this and the people I hang out with and just the things I think about is game development. But it's, I think a big mistake I made during those 2 years, and I still feel like I'm fighting with, is putting so much of my self-evaluation of my self-worth and my confidence in something that, as much as I love, wasn't going to carry me all the way, so to speak. And so, like in those moments where you find yourself like really disheartened, and you need to lean on someone, like don't like be brave and be afraid, because it's a bit uncomfortable. Like seek out people who will spend time with you in that moment of like just depression or anxiety or rage, because like those are the moments that carry you through, and that's something like one of the things that can carry you through. That's something that's definitely helped me, and that's coming from other game developers. I mean, I remember being alone in Washington last year, and like, well, like my first instinct wasn't like to stay inside and just like kind of sulk, but I think spending time with people who are in like similar situations, about like who came off of like really bad layoffs, or other game artists who are in similar situations, like just being there with them and being able to spend time with them helped a lot with me, and just leaning on those people who would pour into me, and hopefully I poured out to them as well in some way, shape, or form. And I can understand how this would be very challenging for people who are, you know, more, I don't want to say introverted so much as like they'll keep themselves mostly, but try to reach out to people, try to like make friends, like be open to each other's lives as much as possible, because like that's stuff that carries far beyond just the work that we do, as much as we love, as much as this is a awesome career to be in, as awesome as the things we create for other people to experience. I mean, I just remember seeing people freak out at some convention when they have VR goggles and they're just buckling underneath the sheer intensity of seeing a blue whale up that close. Like when it gets hard, don't be afraid to lean on each other and to seek out help, or just to cry. I mean, I remember crying a lot. Last year, it's just really intense, like just like screwing up an interview or feeling like I did, and just power through as much as you can. It's gonna hurt. There's gonna be times where it hurts. Just do what you can to reach out to the people in your life. And it sounds vague as I think about it. There's a lot more to unpack than that, but that's something I wish more people talked about, at least in this industry, because it just seems a little more real. I feel like
I'm with you, man. I could do a whole talk on that, and one of my favorite topics, which is my least favorite thing, but one of my favorite topics, which is post-ship depression, right? So it's like you finally make something and you finish it, and then everybody's super sad because now you just killed yourself for art, right? So I think it's very real that you make sure you have things outside of the industry, and you have friends and family and people that you can lean on, and people within the industry as well that you can lean on when things don't go well. That's really great advice. Thank you guys so much for your awesome advice and answering of questions. As always, if you have any follow-up questions, you can post them on the Facebook page, and we'll see if we can get those answered. If not, we'll see you all next month. Thank you for tuning in, and if you want to make sure to get notified, like the Facebook page, subscribe here. Thank you very much. See ya.
Thanks, Grant.
Guys.